All right, everybody, welcome to the CX Engine Show where we're fueling growth through CX. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, the one and only Brooke Sellas. Brooke, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
You're doing good. That's good. Or good. So let's talk a little bit about employee experience in particular today. And we've got a great guest that's going to come on with Dan Nestle from LIXIL. But Brooke, what are you thinking about when you think about employee experience and where that plays part of the CX role?
It's a great topic. I'm really excited to talk about it because, I do a lot of CX work with our clients, but inevitably in doing customer experience work, employee experience comes up because you can't deliver great CX, in my opinion, if you don't have great EX, employee experience. So the employees have to be engaged. You have to have their buy-in, and especially those frontline people who are dealing with customer complaints or, supporting customers and retaining those customers to stay loyal to the brand. You've got to have that buy-in with the employees. So I'm super excited to talk to Dan today about his role and his experience with EX and to give all of you listening or watching some amazing tips.
Well, and speaking of communications and communicating well, it's Dan Nestle, not Wrestle, or sorry, Nestle, not Nestle. Sounds like Wrestle. So Dan,
did I say Nestle?
Hey, well, he's part of the he's part of the Nestle fortune. That's you're originally from Switzerland. You make the teas and the Purinas and all the good products, right?
I used to say that I do have a distant relative, good old great uncle Gustav, who came over from Switzerland. And there was a fallout in the family because he wanted to pronounce it Nestle, but the folks back in Switzerland insisted on Nestle. So Gustav turned his back on them and said, I'm going to go my own way. And here I am, years and years later, or as a church mouse.
I'm neutral about whatever way
no connection, say it, so. No connection at all to the Nestle fortune. But in reality, no relation whatsoever. It's a made up name, Nestle. It's actually my grandfather was traveling back in the day he's a movie theater operator or of some sort, and he wanted to change his name because he felt that the newspapers were getting it wrong all the time. And so he shortened it. I think there was another reason for it. But yeah, he went from Neslowitz to Nestle. I mean, I'm fine with it as it is, but hey, if we're going to manufacture the way it's pronounced, it doesn't really matter. It's not a real name anyway.
Brooke and I were talking about on our last show, damn those German movie operators.
Yeah.
So that'll tell you, but tell us a little bit about what you do and your role at LIXIL.
Sure. I'm the leader of communications and corporate responsibility for LIXIL Americas. So basically, I run the communications team here for us. LIXIL is a global company based in Japan. We own some brands that you might be familiar with. If you've ever been in a bathroom in your life here in the Americas, you would have seen or touched or sat on one of our products. American Standard brand is our brand. We also have a German brand called Grohe, or Grohe, as a lot of Americans like to call it. Really nice.
I butcher everything though.
Yeah, that's fine. It's all good as long as you buy it. It's fine. And another really beautiful kitchen and bath brand called DXV. We are in the business of kitchens and bathrooms. As far as fixtures and fittings, but we also, more importantly, and what I focus on mostly is our efforts in improving global sanitation, access to clean water, hygiene, the importance of keeping, I guess, the importance of clean water, of hygiene, of sanitation, and uplifting is probably not the right word, but bringing people out of extreme and street poverty conditions around the world. We have a wonderful one of our sub brands is called Sato. It's a $5 toilet, and it's we partner with UNICEF and bring we've already brought millions and millions of people in Africa and Southeast Asia into much better conditions. We're working with some major research organizations on what the next generation of toilet is going to be. So there's a lot of interesting things. We're very concerned with sustainability, water efficiency, and so on. So that's the real fun, I think, part of my job. And I get to talk about that. We get to figure out how to communicate that to the masses, and we get to figure out how to, speak with our employees, more pertinent to the show here, about that purpose and about that mission. And that's so key to keeping the business going and moving forward, is when your employees are really engaged and on mission and on purpose.
I love that. And what a fantastic job to say that you're helping bring clean water and toilets, which is something in America we don't even really ever think about. But being able to bring that to people who don't have it is just, I don't know if there's anything better.
You'd be surprised, in America, there are millions of homes that have no access to proper sanitation. Mm-hmm. And, they're literally living in conditions that you would think you'd see at in a shanty town somewhere in third world. And, we're working with a lot of those municipalities to, try to help them figure out the best way to, basically clean up all the shit around their house. I mean, if you want to really kind of think of it that way, it's really, it's an uplifting kind of part of the job. And we are all very happy to be doing that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, when it comes to employee experience, I was reading something the other day from Gallup that said only about 32% of employees in the US, both full-time and part-time, are engaged with the company, which means almost 70% of people aren't engaged at work. So in your role, how do you have to think about employee experience to get people engaged? And how does that then tie into the communication strategy?
Sure. But first of all, you have to be working for an organization that values employee engagement and employee experience. And it has to be, a tone from the top thing. And it's, it's maybe in some cases it's easier for a smaller organization. So anybody out there who's got very few employees, it's an easier thing to do in some ways. But for bigger companies like ours, we have like 55,000 employees globally. The tone from the top is really what matters. And you also have to be sure that communications and HR are hand in hand and get along and aligned and working forward towards the same purpose. And you'd think that, in a lot of companies, I think, they think that building that kind of employee engagement falls under human resources. Mm-hmm. And when has human resources ever hired communications people? Or marketers, right? Mm-hmm. Even better now. Like, we want people who understand marketing and communications to be on communications teams so that, you can find the best way to engage your people. And I think, it's not a surprise that only 30% are engaged, because, companies just simply don't know how to look at their employees as equal or more important than their external stakeholders. Ugh. Right. So, and this has changed a lot over the decades. I've experienced it, I've seen it, I've felt it, but now, we have to know that when your employees are basically, mobile and can market their own services anywhere they want to, and it's easy to say that, it's harder to do that, but it's still the truth. At some point, people who are not engaged and not satisfied are going to realize that, wait a second, my skill set, my personality, whatever it is, can probably be transplanted to a place where I am engaged and valued. Mm-hmm. So, these are all kind of, important issues. I don't know if I've answered your question, but
you did.
Yeah, I think it's all important stuff.
No, you definitely did. You have to care, right? It's not that we care-ish.
Yeah, care-ish.
It's actually caring.
Yeah. And it starts with understanding like behaviors of your people and making sure that you're aligned on the behaviors and the values. And that's, again, it's not just, something that, you could leave to the HR team or to the comms team, or it has to be a group effort. It's really important to do that moving forward, to collaboration internally.
Well, I want to touch on something you just, reminded us of. And I think this goes back to how I'm sure you have to look at employee experience as part of your communication strategy, but also with people being a lot more remote today. Mm-hmm. Creating engagement is now a whole different issue when they were down the hall versus 10 blocks away or 10 miles away or 10,000 miles away. So how do you sort of think about that, especially because you were already, I mean, 55,000 employees
Yep.
that you're communicating to is one thing, but now that they're all completely dispersed, or
Sure.
a lot of them have been dispersed.
Yeah, I mean, we are one of the few companies, certainly one of the few Japanese companies that is encouraging people to follow the hybrid approach, own your day. It's almost a mantra from our America's leaders, own your day. But our global CEO, Kinya Seto, has said the same thing. Just, we're not a culture or a civilization, and we have to trust each other to get the job done. Now, of course, there are people who work in factories and on the line that this is not an option for them. But for those of us who are, dispersed, working remotely, it's opened up a lot of opportunity on the one hand for people to, work from wherever they want to work from, and they've enjoyed that. And on the other hand, it's definitely suppressed the benefits of being in person and being collected and being together, But coping with that and understanding that dispersed workforce and engaging people more is I think still an unanswered question. We don't know what the best kind of, I guess, tactics or the best strategy is. But what we do know is that you have to, just like with any audience, you have to create something that's engaging and relevant enough and important enough to what they need to do every day to get them to pay attention.
Love that.
Yeah, and we have to do that using whatever tools we have available. It helps to be experimental. It helps to really be with an organization. Again, this is a behavior, an organizational value behavior thing. The leadership really needs to allow the communicators and the HR folks to experiment and run with this a little bit. But we've been fortunate to try a whole variety of different kinds of events and content styles and techniques and strategies that we hope are bringing our employees along the journey more closely and keeping them engaged.
It also helps that you have a little bit of humility in that you just said you don't know everything, because most people not even necessarily assume that they do, but they assume that their employees, because they're on the payroll, are going to be engaged and active, and to have just a hint of humility, and really try to, it's almost like what we think about with CX, pulling the customer at the center of the conversation. Now you're starting to do that with the employee.
Absolutely. And it's what you just said. Like, a lot of companies take it for granted that, employee, is being paid. They signed on for this, so, okay, what we say is ultimately going to be the most important thing. And they'll deal with it. And in some cases, maybe that's true. There are hard times when companies need to make hard decisions, and we have to ask the employees to really understand this. But there's an engagement element there to help the employees get on board with those decisions, whether they like it or not. Sometimes we have to delineate the difference between work and play, and as much as people say work is your family or work is like is the most enjoyable thing. That's not always true. It's, the reality of the world is that work is sometimes work. Even family is sometimes not fun. So, we do have to spend some time, understanding, pardon me, understanding that, that employees are, you're dealing with humans. So, you can't always be like trying to expecting everybody to be in a lovey-dovey situation all the time. Right. But that said, the company does need to recognize that the employees are, if not in control, because, it's not that they're in control, but they share control. And in a bigger way than we probably realize.
I want to go back to kind of what you said in the beginning when you touched on, corporate social responsibility, or CSR. How does employee experience, or EX, play a role in CSR? Like, can you elaborate a little bit on LIXIL CSR program, and then how employee experience plays a role in that? Sure.
Well, I mean, first of all, CSR, whether you call it corporate social responsibility, corporate responsibility, it's such a large or big catch-all term, and we're still kind of trying to figure out exactly how we describe it. Right now we use CR as a sort of I guess, a convenient catch-all. But I think it's more about really impact. So rather than to call this the corporate responsibility team, corporate responsibility also feels like there's a lot of reporting and it's like ESG stuff. You know, it's true.
It's a little buttoned up. It's a little scary.
But that's part of it, right? But there's a larger part of it, which is the meaning and the purpose, which is all about impact and what impact are we having. So once you start to think of things in terms of impact, that's where employees, I think, play such a critical role, because, you know, you can say as a management team or as a strategic decision for how you're going to spend your funds as a company, where you're going to donate money, where you're going to support, you know, whatever causes stuff, that's a philanthropic thing or a reactive kind of situation or whatever kind of sponsorships. It's important. But is there heart in that? It's hard to tell. It's kind of like being care-ish, right? A little bit, but it in some ways it can feel like it's just, you know, it's just checking off some boxes. But when you're aiming at impact and you involve your employees in that process, then the employees start to feel like partners in the business, and they start to feel like, wait a second, I'm actually living a purpose here, right? And in our case, the purpose that we have, you know, we say it's making better homes a reality for everyone everywhere. It's a pretty good purpose.
Yeah.
And when you drill down into that, you know, some employees may come on and say, yeah, okay, we install showers, and, you know, or we make showers, and we make toilets, and we make faucets. And of course, you know, we want to, but actually, you know, it's not the faucets and the showers and all that make a home. A home can be anything. A home can be your house. A home can be an office. A home can be, you know, a village, wherever, or everything's shared. So how do we make that better at a bigger level? And that's where you start to think about impact. So I referred earlier to our Sato program, those $5 toilets that are, you know, that we provide, or, you know, we do sell it. It is a business. So it's a business, but it is a social business that is really doing good in the world. And when we talk about that with our employees, they feel better about the efforts that they're making to, you know, develop a new color for a faucet coating, for example. You know, like no matter where you are in the organization, you can tie your effort to somebody not having diarrhea today. You know, in some child,
cause.
Well, some child not dying.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a good thing to keep thinking about. And, you know, our employees find that they feel good about that, but they also find that they're living at this kind of intersection of their purpose and the company's purpose, right? So if you can make that happen, you know, then your employees will be engaged, or they'll want to be engaged with more.
I was just thinking that because you have this purpose and this program, you probably have more than 32% of your employees engaged, or I would imagine you do, because there's a pulling of the heartstrings.
Sure.
And there's that ultimate, you know, for me, as someone who's highly empathetic, I would just be like, what can I do? Like, tell me what to do to like make this better, or to bring this to more places or people.
It expands too. It's such an expansive and wonderful mission and purpose to be on. So if you're, you know, our employees, for example, are, you know, we have employee resource groups like a lot of large companies do. They have a lot of autonomy in the things that they decide and the programs that they want to implement. We communicate all the time, constantly, daily, you know, almost religiously across our internal platforms, occasional emails, you know, keeping them informed of what's happening with both our actual business and the products that we're developing, but also our purpose and our mission. And it's really, really fascinating to see how that starts to spread across. Okay, it's not just clean water and hygiene. Well, it starts to get into things like social justice and social equity. I mean, you know, access to clean water is a major, major issue, and we're uncovering stuff. You know, one thing I think our employees, why we probably have a little bit of a higher employee engagement, is because we're not a political organization, right? We're not like Nike or one of those brands that feels like it has to make a stand every time something comes out. We actually are everybody needs good hygiene. Everybody needs a toilet, right? So we have to really think about humanity. And when you think about humanity, you think about those issues, you start to think about, okay, why don't these people have access to clean water? Why are the folks in rural Alabama paying a larger portion of their salary for water when people like up in New York are paying like nothing, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for that, but none of them are really good. And then there's also issues with gender equality across this whole area of sanitation. When you start to say to people, yes, we're helping people in India, for example, to install toilets, it's like, okay, great, it's cleaner. No, it's not just cleaner. Women, and in particular young women, are often victims of rape and abuse because there's something called open defecation. I'm sorry to get really graphic here, but they have to go out in the fields in the open to do what they need to do. And, it's particularly dangerous.
Yeah.
So,
wow, I never even thought about that, but now that you said it, it makes so much sense.
It's a very, very dangerous world out there for when you think that of places that don't have access to good hygiene. And
wow,
helping that change is an important part of what we do.
I want to come volunteer now. Whenever you have your next volunteer, you call me.
You got it. Yeah.
Well,
and that's only scratching the surface. We have so much.
Sadly, I don't even know why I know this stat, but I mean, it's well over. I remember reading this. Well over, like 750,000 people die every year from diarrhea.
Yeah,
I've traveled to a lot of third world countries, lived in one for a little while, and you take it so for granted.
Yes.
Yes. The kind of impact you can make.
If you ever watch on Netflix the Bill Gates series, in the mind of Bill Gates, I think the very first episode is about that.
Yeah.
He starts off with the question, why do 700,000 children every day die of diarrhea? What kind of world do we live in? How is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes from there to sort of talk about, well, we need better toilets. And it's a big problem. We're happy to be part of solving that. So employees get into that. Like they're really, when you set, they have the day-to-day minutia in front of them, but if they know that they're on a purpose and on a mission, they get more engaged naturally.
Well, let's move away from number 2 for a minute and talk about,
goodness.
as a communications guy that leads, this big brand, what's your biggest tip for tailoring the messages to a specific audience, specifically employees? How do you really, give us a great tip on how to talk to them a little differently?
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing that you would do if you're communicating with any audience, which is first to know them, right? Understand these people. And understand that as the person who is, or the people on your team, like my mighty team of 6 does this incredible work for the Americas, but we have a global team that also works on all this stuff. You have to approach it so that it's not you that's communicating. It is the company, and you have to understand your audience first. So you would conduct research just like you would with any other marketing or communications effort. What's relevant to our employees today? How are they segmented across the population? Is one facility, one location different from another? The answer is absolutely yes, right? When we consider an issue that's coming up, how's that going to play in Texas versus how's that's going to play in Michigan? It's going to play different ways. So you have to understand your audience first, and then once you understand your audience, then you can get about to figuring out what's relevant to them. Research, do the same thing. We conduct surveys a lot. There's a lot of polls. There's HR has yearly or biannual, like employee engagement surveys. So the data is really important. The data is really important. It has to speak to you as a communicator. Everything that you do should be informed by that. Then you create your messaging, of course, and there's a corporate strategy that you have to align things with, right? And then there's the relevance factor. So we have to live in the middle of those things, So I think the number one tip, though, is, of course, know your audience, just like it is for any marketing or communications, good marketing or communications effort.
I love that. You made me start to think, as you said that, like, how many companies are actually like doing the audience research on their own employees before they put out messaging? I'm like, none. One. Yeah. That's a fantastic tip. So everybody listening or watching, please write that down and take it back to your own brand and company and figure out how you can use audience research for your employee experience.
Yeah,
okay. So last question for you, Dan. If you had one tip, like the most important tip that you could give when it comes to employee experience, what would it be?
So that's a very difficult question because as you've heard by now, I'm a talker and it's hard for me to narrow things down to one thing. So I'm going to just give you a big kind of general thing, which is it is a mistake to treat employees like your customers. You have to treat them better than your customers. That I think is my number one thing to say. Like your customers will come and go, but hopefully they'll come and they'll stay. And that's all CX, right? That's the job of CX, and comms has to feed into that. But CX will fall flat on its face if your employee base doesn't believe in what you're doing and isn't feeling treated well. And if you're not feeling treated well, you are not going to treat customers, as well as you're being treated.
Mhm.
So you have to treat your employees better than your customers, so that when they do talk to the customers, they're definitely in a place where they're able to transmit that, that joy, that purpose, their, positivity, whatever it needs to be, the helpfulness, the humility that will help them shepherd the customers through the process. Part of that is to communicate. Just communicate constantly, consistently, transparently, interactively. Just keep it going. If you don't have a platform, get one. There's a lot of free ones out there. Get one. If you're a big company, make sure you invest in one. You always have email too. So no excuse. Keep communicating and treat people better than you treat your customers.
I love it.
Oh, that's like the perfect line. I love it so much.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, this has been so insightful. I think we are only beginning to explore employee experience. I think we're going to continue on with this topic. I can feel Kenneth's eyeballs on me. Like, I know we're going to keep picking this up because this was such a wealth of information. So thank you so much, Dan, for being with us and literally telling us everything. You just opened the book and let us read the whole thing, which is wonderful. If you are listening, go connect with Daniel. It's spelled Nestle, but pronounced Nestle on LinkedIn. He's a wonderful dude. I love him so much. So he's got a lot of smart things to say, just not what he said today. And if you know someone who you think would be a wonderful person to interview for the CX Engine Show, please reach out to myself or Kenneth, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. Let us know. It could be yourself or someone else. And if you're watching this or listening to this, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our future shows. We've got a lot of cool guests coming up and more fun stories about makeup. So we look forward to chatting with you all soon. And don't forget to fuel your growth with CX.